Okay, we'll now start on section 2 of the STACE excerpt. This will be our last page for this particular lesson or session. Throughout the modern period until quite recently, it was assumed, both by the philosophers who denied free will and by those who defended it, that determinism is inconsistent with free will. All right, so let's go ahead and put a triangle over determinism. Whenever you hear or see or read determinism by itself in this excerpt or in the STACE readings, I want you to be thinking of what you learned about metaphysical determinism. So when he uses the word determinism, he is talking about metaphysical determinism, a theory about reality that endorses the thesis of universal causation, which, as you know, says that all events are the inevitable and necessary result of prior events. As you can see, he is talking about not only those who deny free will, but also those who defend free will. What words do you think I'm going to have you do a triangle with arrows over in line 53? Free will, of course. And then, of course, we want a triangle over determinism, or you can have a triangle over here, and we'll just have it in a different place, but it will be for metaphysical determinism. And notice what he's saying here. It's saying he's pointing out what? An assumption that they had, right? Who has the assumption? Some philosophers who happen to endorse metaphysical determinism. And what do they say? That indeterminism is inconsistent. Remember, that's a really important standard in philosophy with what? Free will. Okay? So what he's saying here is he's telling us that what? He's going to be focusing on the incompatibilist position on metaphysical determinism and free will. Okay, so exposing the assumption that both the HD will mean hard determinist and libertarian hold, exposing the assumption that, let's put it this way, exposing an assumption that both the hard determinist and the libertarian hold, and remember we're talking about metaphysical libertarianism, not political libertarianism, and that is that metaphysical determinism, it's going to mean metaphysical determinism, so by implication TUC, the thesis of universal causation, is incompatible with free will. Okay, so now he's going to present that position, right? So here he says, if a man's actions were wholly determined by chains of causes stretching back into the remote past, so that they could be predicted beforehand by a mind which knew all the causes, it was assumed that they, and that is what? Actions, by they, he's referring back to actions over here, could not in that case be free. Okay, so what is he stating here in lines 155 through 160? He is presenting to us, so STACE presents the thesis of universal causation and what some believe about it relative to acting freely. Okay? All right. So he's presenting the thesis of universal causation The idea that what? That acting freely is what? Incompatible with the thesis of universal causation. And who believes this? Both the hard determinist and the libertarian. They both believe that this is the case. If one thing is true, that is the thesis of universal causation, then free will is not possible. That is true that free will is not possible. So let's go ahead and draw our triangles. So in line 55, after free will, what is the first word you should have a triangle over? Actions. What is the second word you should have a triangle over in line 55? Or I should say third word altogether, determined. And what should you think of when I say determined or determinism? You should put what word in front of that? That's metaphysically determined. So write metaphysically above the word determined here and then put a little triangle here. You can pause the video. Remember, you can always pause and rewind me with my videos, which is kind of cool. Okay, so we're going to also put a triangle over chains. I want you to think about what it means to be shackled or tied to a chain of causes from the past that you can't undo. So go ahead and put a triangle over chains, and then if causes, I'm going to put chain of causes stretching back into the remote past. Do you see how this is really showing the thesis of universal causation here? So then in line 57, we're not going to do anything. Line 58, what do you think is the first word we're going to put a triangle over? Causes. Okay. And then in line 59, put a word over free. Okay. Now, Stace goes on to say, this implies that a certain definition of actions done from a free will was what? Assumed. Okay, so he's saying there's an assumption about a definition in this. In fact, there's an assumption inside the assumption, if you will. Namely, that, and that is actions of free will. So when he says that, he means actions, right? That they are actions done from a free will, actually. Okay, so that actions done from a free will, are actions not wholly, let's put a underline like this, and then let's do a double arrow triangle, are not wholly determined by causes or predictable beforehand. He says, let us shorten this by saying that free will was defined as meaning indeterminism. Okay, so right here, he thinks he is giving a definition for indeterminism. And I really should have added metaphysical indeterminism. So if you happen to see the word indeterminism being used again by Stace, then you want to think metaphysical indeterminism. To use the language of Tuck, this would mean that metaphysical indeterminism is what? Says that, and a way to put this in terms of the negating, opposing the thesis of universal causation as saying not all events, and remember from our earlier lesson, right? Put a triangle over events. Not all events, that events are behaviors, choices, decisions, emotions, feelings, responses, reactions, psychology, but also that which applies to group levels and institutional levels, countries and whatnot. That's events can refer to all of that and any of that. So, but the indeterminist, the metaphysical indeterminist claims that not all events are the necessary, let's circle the word not, inevitable result of prior causes. So metaphysical determinism would say all events are the necessary inevitable result of prior causes. Indeterminism, underline the in part, that means without determinism. Not all events are the necessary inevitable result of prior causes. So metaphysical determinism is in opposition to metaphysical indeterminism. And so what he's doing then is he's exposing the definition of free will that is implied by both the hard determinist and the metaphysical libertarian. Okay, This is the incorrect definition, which has led to the denial of free will. So now, notice how he's starting to what? Connect what he thought about the problem of free will being a verbal semantic dispute, which is that of an incorrect definition. So the incorrect definition, which has led to the definition of free will, so we want to put a double arrow triangle right here. As soon as we see what the true, let's do a double arrow triangle here, we shall find that the question whether the world is deterministic, so again, we want to say metaphysically deterministic, as Newtonian science implied, or in a measure indeterministic, and of course you want to write the word metaphysically here, again you can pause me, as current physics teaches, is wholly irrelevant to the problem. Okay, so then do I want you to write any more notes about this? Oh yeah, so he's saying some people, let's just do a quick little triangle. Some people are saying, according to him, right, that some philosophers are saying that free will means what? Basically, we could just take this part right here, okay? Or free will is expressed, he would basically say actions. In fact, we should say events that are not the inevitable, necessary result of prior actions. Or I should say causes. If I've been saying actions, I should have said causes. Okay, let's go to our last paragraph for this session, for this lesson. Oh, and okay, so then the idea is that the issue, like with how the word man is defined, right? Remember he said if we define man as a five-legged creature, that leads to the absurd what? Conclusion that there are no men. And he's saying the problem with the definition for free will is the same time. It's probably the same thing. So first, before he moves on to talk about the resolution to the problem of free will, it being a verbal dispute, he needs to figure out what definition are they using for free will. Why do they keep saying that there are no examples here? Well, he's going to say it's not that there isn't any. He's going to say that the definition is a problem. So he says, okay, of course, there is a sense in which one can define a word arbitrarily in any way one pleases. Okay, so let's put a triangle over define. But a definition may nevertheless be called correct or incorrect. It is correct if it accords, that is, aligns, with common usage of the word defined. Let's underline common usage, incorrect. It is incorrect if it does not. And of course, by it, he is talking about definition. And if you give an incorrect definition, absurd and true results are likely to follow. For instance, there is nothing to prevent you from arbitrarily defining a man as a five-legged animal. But this is incorrect in the sense that that it does not accord with the ordinary meaning of the word. Also, it has the absurd result of leading to a denial of the existence of men. So then he goes on to say that this shows that. Do I want to go on to the rest of this? Let me see if I have just one more sentence because I didn't give you a fourth page. Give me 1 second. No, don't worry about this. He's basically going to say that this shows that common usage is a criterion for deciding what is the correct definition. But we already have here for what I want to take notes on. So don't worry about the rest of that sentence. I'll give you the rest of this paragraph next time. What I do want you to write here is that, I want you to go ahead and draw let's just put this in a square right here. Okay, where he's talking about how do we decide if a definition is correct and how do we decide if a definition is incorrect. Okay. When he talks about common usage, he is talking about, it's the same thing as what he's talking about with ordinary meaning. And notice that I didn't put a triangle here over accord, but I did up here, so we want to have accord there as well. So then the next thing you want to write is that here Stace is presenting rules for rationally and objectively deciding whether, that's a whether, W-H-E-T-H-E-R, a word has been defined correctly or incorrectly. The criterion or standard is that of common usage, what he means later with the phrase ordinary meaning. So how do everyday people use the word, in other words? Okay. This will be used to resolve the debate slash problem, I should say debate about slash problem of free will and morality. And that ends our notes. Make sure you follow the instructions and warnings that I gave you in the first video. I was really clear, probably more clear than ever before, on how I want you to take pictures and post this, and what your options were for how I did the setup for how many times you can upload something.